What's good, y'all? Black and Indeed, we are back. Still season 5, episode 8 now.
Yep.
Episode 8 that we were just talking about. I didn't even feel like we filmed this many
not.
episodes yet. Time's been going by so fast.
The number actually surprised me, I'm not gonna lie. 8 is a lot.
Yeah, for sure, it's a lot, but we're getting it done. We're getting it out there for y'all. So as always, my name is Isaiah.
My name is Luzolo.
This is Black and Indeed. Before we get started with our topic today, we just wanted to address one thing. We had a comment on our last video, the rap music is not the issue video, and on that comment, we felt that we wanted to address not everything, but all we wanted to say about that comment was we felt that the person who wrote that comment, we're not sure if it was a troll or an actual person who really felt that way, and if they actually felt that way, that's perfectly fine. But one thing that we just wanted to say was it seemed as if they just completely twisted and misunderstood our words. I don't know if the twisting was on purpose.
Completely twisted.
But it seems like they missed a lot of the points, and you know that is what it is. But one thing that we will say is we felt that it was somewhat disrespectful the way that comment came off. Y'all can see the edited version, but the original comment came off a lot more disrespectful than that. They were, you know, kind of saying.
Oh, they edited it.
Yes, they edited it. And so they took out some of the disrespectful parts. But what we will say is we understand this is an opinionated talk show. You know, Black and Indeed is an opinionated talk show. Everything that we say is our opinions. And we may say some things that are wrong. And we expect y'all to correct us on that. We're not saying we're always perfect. We're not saying we're always, you know.
100%. I fully agree with that.
But please, if y'all ever disagree with us, express your disagreement, but please do it respectfully. Not like how that original person said that comment. I just wanted to just get that out there, that out the way.
I'd also love to shed light on all like the great comments that we're getting,
yes,
like with people like showing so much love and support. I was like looking the other day. I just opened the video because I was like for our newsletter. Sign up for our newsletter, by the way, if you have not already.
It'll be in the description.
I was like just copying the link, and then when I accidentally scrolled, and I'm like, wait, there's like good comments on this video, and I was reading them, and I'm like, this is so heartfelt and just so adorable. So thank you for everyone who does support us and who shows that in the comments. We really appreciate reading those messages.
Absolutely, they mean the world to us. It keeps us going all the time. It makes everything that we do, you know, worth it. It shows that y'all really are listening, that y'all really do appreciate what we're doing, and it just makes all the hard work that we put into it actually worth it. So with that being said, we want to go ahead and get into our topic today, which is, I would like to talk about the midterm election. Luzolo is really excited about talking about the debate that went on campus. Was it last week or?
Yes, it was last Tuesday.
Last Tuesday.
Oh wait, last one. It was last week. I forget what day.
Last Wednesday, I think. Last Wednesday. So we're gonna go ahead and get into that. I'll go ahead and I'll hand it off to you first, since you've been so excited to talk about this.
Yeah, I brought this up the second I watched the video. So I think that our debate was definitely a little alarming. There were a lot of homophobic, transphobic,
Explain what the debate was,
racist.
first of all, though.
Oh, the debate. Okay, that's true. The debate was, so on campus we have a Republican organization and a Democrat organization. So this debate, each organization chose one representative from that organization to be in a debate with each other for the midterms, and this happens every election. So this year is for midterms. In 2020, it was for the presidential election. So they basically discuss different topics that Bridge ND, which is an organization on campus that works to kind of like bring people together with different parties to just talk about and discuss and express different viewpoints. So Bridge ND is the one who kind of like heads it. And they came up with questions. A lot of them were about like America's families, the economy, criminal justice. Those were some of the topics that they went into. So this is the debate. So there was one representative from the Democrats. He was a senior, and then there was one representative from the Republicans. He was a freshman. I was very surprised that they let a freshman talk. Not that like all freshmen are stupid, but I think there's like a lot of development that you go into, like, I feel like we're all very naive. Like, we're still naive, honestly. Like, I just think like it would have been more wise to have an older person do it, especially because the Democrats had a senior. So I feel like that would have been a lot wiser if they also had a senior. But anyway, it was very frustrating to me because of all of like the homophobic, transphobic, and racist sentiment that came off from the ND Republicans. There was during the talk about criminal justice, he kept repeating like the issue of like fatherlessness, and I know that was a direct jab at the Black community. He didn't have to say that, but that's a common, it's a common belief among people. There was also talk about abortion. There was also talk about affirmative action, and basically most of the sentiments and opinions that were expressed were the same opinions that the general parties agreed with. So yeah, that just frustrated me. Something that I knew for a fact that was a lie was that the representative from the Republicans said that most people in prison or incarcerated are there for like violent crimes, which is definitely not true. Most people who are incarcerated, they're there for non-violent crimes, which I think is not a very wise thing. Because I feel like there's no need to be behind bars unless you've done something violent, in my opinion. And it's definitely, the criminal justice system is definitely targeted against Black and brown people, which is something that the representative did not believe. In terms of abortion, you could tell, like, there's obvious, with the Republicans, obviously not for abortion, and Democrats for abortion. Something that I loved is
It's pro-choice. We'll say pro-choice at least.
Pro-choice. Oh yeah, that's right. Pro-choice and yeah, my bad. Yeah, that's true. It's not pro-abortion. Thank you for correcting me. Words are just coming out right now. It's not pro-abortion. You're right. It's pro-choice and then pro-life. And something that I really liked that the representative from the Democrats said was that he acknowledged the fact that like everybody in like up to that point that we have seen have all been men. Like the two people asking questions were men and the two representatives were also men. So we just acknowledged that fact. And I just really like that acknowledgement because I feel like there's so much discussion about abortion, especially like among men. And while everyone's entitled to their opinions, I think it's important to acknowledge that like this is not an experience that men ever have to go through or ever have to like actually consider because it doesn't apply to them. So I really did like that acknowledgement. So that's a few highlights. I rambled on for a long time. I'm gonna pass this back to you.
Yeah, I didn't even watch the debate. I just didn't feel the need to do it. I felt it would be somewhat counterproductive in a sense. I didn't, with these sort of things, especially with conservatives, I'm not trying to jab or hate on all conservatives, but with a lot of these conservatives, especially from what I've heard from this representative of the Notre Dame Republican Party, you can tell that there's just no reasoning with some of them. There's no way to really get points across to them. A lot of people, Democrats and Republicans alike, it just seems like Republicans just seem to be a lot more of this, very closed-minded. They're very set in stone on their beliefs and they're not really willing to change. And so I knew that there'd be a lot of, homophobia that would be, spout out. I knew there'd be a lot of stuff like that, and I just figured I'm never going to waste my time to actually watch this. But
no, that's fair. All it did was make me angry. So
exactly.
You're valid.
I've heard I'm sure everything he said is just recycled, talking points from Republican politicians. There's probably not much actual independent thought in there. So I didn't really
there was a few. The Democrat representative pointed it out too. Like, I forget specifically what because I did watch this over the weekend, so it's been over a week now. But there were a few opinions that were specifically his own, and then the Democrat representative wanted to make sure, like, okay, these are your opinions though. This is not the opinions of your party. So it's like it was like a mixture of like some of his own opinions, but then also the opinions of the Republican Party.
Well, then I apologize for being misinformed. I said I did not.
But a lot of it was. But you're right. A lot of it was definitely. It's just recycled stuff that you just like keep hearing, and you just don't. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I just kind of felt the need to not really, watch it. I didn't watch it live. I didn't watch the replay on YouTube. I'm sure a lot of people have watched it. But kind of want to transition that into the actual, midterm election that just has gone on. Midterm elections were on Tuesday. We're filming this on Thursday of midterm election week.
Yes.
And man, this midterm election, it really showed where we are as a country, in my opinion. It showed where we are politically, socially, all of that as a country. And I was very disappointed. Republicans said that there was going to be this crazy red wave. They were going to take over the Senate. They're going to take over the House. They're going to make sure that, Democrats just had no say-so on anything, no power. And fortunately, that didn't really actually happen. It didn't pan out that way. But there was several things that happened in this midterm election that really did disappoint me. As I stayed up late until like 2 in the morning, just refreshing the NBC News page just to see, who was being voted, how many votes this person had, how many votes this person had. Just to keep with the election. I had to go to sleep because I was so disappointed, so frustrated.
We still don't know, and it's Thursday.
Yeah.
We still don't know what's happening with some of the states.
Yeah, but the first thing I want to talk about that just really just annoyed me was the Georgia Senate debate, or the Georgia Senate election. That really frustrated me because that really showed me where we stand as a country. For those of y'all who don't really follow politics, I don't know how you could really miss this, but if you don't follow politics, the Georgia Senate debate was between Reverend Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker was a football player. He played at the University of Georgia. That's really all he's done. He played in the NFL, but
sorry.
Sorry, but his credentials aren't all there, even though he said if you put his resume up against Obama's, he would win, whatever that means. Obama was president. But anyway, that election disappointed me because for those of y'all that haven't been keeping up, neither one of them have actually won yet. This election is still going on. It's going into a runoff. Yeah. Which makes no sense to me because Raphael Warnock, he's the incumbent senator over there in Georgia. He's had his faults, but he's also had his moments of goodness, of positivity. And in my opinion, this should have been like 100% to 0. No one should have voted for Herschel Walker because
that's something I've thought about too.
Exactly.
Too many of these races are too close.
Exactly.
Like that's unsettling for me.
And that's what bothered me because whenever before this election even started, I was like, there's no way Herschel Walker even like stands a chance against Reverend Warnock. But then we're still seeing that they're going into a runoff. And one thing I really wanted to, not even one thing, there's many things I want to point out with this, but the first thing I wanted to point out was, what this midterm election in Georgia has shown us is people are only going to vote based off of if there's a D or an R.
Yep.
And this really showed that because Herschel Walker, he's a Republican man. Okay, if you want to run as a Republican, cool, do you? No problem with that. Except for the fact that he stands against every single Republican value there is. And the Republicans, they stand on, they're anti-abortion. But yet there's paper trails and receipts that Herschel Walker in the past paid for an abortion, or maybe even 2.
I mean, considering he's a former NFL player, I'm not
NFL player, right? And there's receipts that literally prove that. You look at how Republicans are all about being family, right? You spoke to how the Republican representative here on campus spoke about fatherlessness and the family values. Republicans are all about family values, but yet Herschel Walker's entire family, they literally hate him. His own son, Christian Walker, who is a very out there conservative person, he even denounced his own father and said his father has ruined their entire family's life. He's abused his ex-wife, he's abused his family, he's threatened to kill his wife. And he's put all that on a mental illness, which we'll get into a little bit later.
That's true. He doesn't father his kids either, does he?
Not at all. So he doesn't even stand for family values. He's not really pro, or anti-abortion. He's not really pro-life. And then on top of all that, the man came and put together a sentence. How can you be a senator and you can't even put together a coherent sentence? It doesn't make sense to me. Republicans, they hate Joe Biden, they hate the way that he speaks because they say Sleepy Joe, he can't put together a sentence. But then you look at Herschel Walker and somehow it's even worse than Joe Biden. I don't understand that, but yet for whatever reason, it's just they continue to vote for him. He doesn't stand for anything the Republicans stand for.
How did he end up being the nominee? Like the Republican nominee? Like how did he get that? Was he the only one?
So basically, from what I understand, he was a primary contender because as soon as he put his name out there, from what I understand, he is a Georgia legend. Like everyone in Georgia loves him only because whenever he played football at the University of Georgia, literally just because. So he has all these votes just because of his legend status there because of football. That's just about it. Outside of that, if you follow his campaign, he hasn't really said anything policy-wise that he agrees with, that he really stands for. He hasn't said.
Love it.
he hasn't said anything that actually makes sense or that he could actually run off of. All that he said is he's anti-abortion and he's against critical race theory and indoctrinating children. That's all he said. And those buzzwords, those little buzz phrases is all that he needed.
That's all he needed to say, clearly.
That's all he needed to receive 49% of the vote as of the recording of this episode. 49% of the vote. Neither one have received 50% of the votes. They're going into a runoff, which is it's ridiculous to me. How can you just vote for something? Like, how can you literally just vote for this man just because there's an R next to his name? I can understand that you maybe don't like, Reverend Warnock. Okay, I understand that. Mm-hmm. But that's why I hate political parties. It's the reason why I hate how political parties have started and how divided we are. Because if you don't like Reverend Warnock, but you also realize that Herschel Walker shouldn't even be in contention. He shouldn't even be considered for this for Senate. Yeah. This is why independents are so important. Someone you can vote for outside of the main two parties, but since these independents don't have the resources to branch out and get into a big stage like the Democrats and Republicans, they don't have the ability to establish themselves like that. You're confined to vote for these people, and it frustrated me so much as I stayed up until 2 a.m. just trying to understand how over 1 million people could vote for Herschel Walker. It has made no sense to me. It has made no sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think about how, you mentioned, most people just vote for people who align with their party or the party that they're loyal to. I remember when I got my ballot, I knew who I was going to end up voting for, and yet I still looked at everyone's platforms just because I wanted to make sure, hey, I want to make sure I'm valid in what I'm choosing. I'm not going to lie, when I looked at the results, I only looked at Illinois, which is where I voted. I looked and made sure that all my people won, and I think they did, which is great. We love Illinois. And then I looked at Indiana. I'm pretty sure like only one out of like all of the seats open like went to like Democrats, which like shows how red this state is in Indiana, which I find so funny. But anyway, I did a big sidetrack. My point was, I feel like so many people are just they just want, like, either they just hate the opposite side so much that they vote for whoever is on, like, let's say like it's a Democrat, for example. Like it's just that Democrats hate Republicans so much that they're just going to vote for a Democrat no matter what, or Republicans just hate Democrats so much that they're just going to vote for the Republican. And it's just like, and it's mostly just like loyalty, which is why sometimes loyalty just like frustrates me. Well, it's like, it's great to be loyal and everything, but like there's an element to where like, because you're so loyal, you don't like care about like holding someone accountable or actually like showing like faults, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's like constructive feedback, and it makes me think about how like a lot of talk recently has been about like the difference between like Trumpism and like Republicanism, and it's like, I understand that there's a difference, but sometimes it's very difficult for me to be like, well, because like when you have Republicans who are just like, especially like when the Trumpist Republicans are the ones that are almost always like the face of the whole party, it's very hard to take, at least for me, to take like Republicans seriously, because you don't you don't correct like those extremists. And it's just like, for me, it's like, I feel like there are people who've talked about like, oh, the Republicans have gotten so extreme, and it's just like, yeah, they've also made me so extreme on the other side just because of how extreme that they've gotten. So yeah, it's just, it's weird. Yeah, it's just frustrating for me.
Yeah, it's very
frustrating. Like, we need to correct each other. Like, when someone is lying or when someone's obviously being extremist or like against other people, like, you need to correct them. We can't just like keep letting people do it. Like, why are we still being bystanders? It's so frustrating to me.
It's very frustrating, and you know, and it points back to loyalty. You know, they're so loyal to their political parties that they're willing to not even look at other people on the ballot. You know, like if you're a Democrat but you agree with maybe a Republican mayor or a Republican council representative, councilman, or a Republican senator, whatever, you can always vote for those people. Like, you shouldn't have to vote based on party, right? Like, you should be able to vote based off of your own interests, based off of who is serving your best interests, who is serving your interests the best, who is serving them the most, X, Y, and Z, right? That's how voting should be. But people are so loyal, they're so tied to their parties, where, like you said, if there's a far right, you know, extremist or a radical, whatever they want to call them nowadays, then that could make someone more left-leaning. If it's someone that's so left-leaning, it could make someone that's on the right even more right. You know, and
facts, yeah.
And that's what's so frustrating. And this election really showed that. And you know, you talked about, you know, Illinois, Chicago. What hurt me was Texas.
Oh yeah.
Texas was,
I
that's
feel
where I'm
so
from.
sad.
That's where I'm from.
I saw
Texas.
all of like the memes and stuff about how people were so sad. Oh yeah. I was sad for y'all too.
Oh my goodness. I don't even want to go back to that whenever I saw that Beto had lost. You know, Beto, he has his faults, obviously. No one is a perfect politician. No one's a perfect candidate.
Facts. The perfect ones don't want to run. Let's be honest. They don't want to run.
Yeah, but, you know, Beto, I liked a lot of the things that he stood for. You know, legalizing marijuana, wanting to, you know, promote gun reform, wanting to promote the history of in education, wanting kids to actually obtain history, but also recognize that, you know, for white kids who were learning history about slavery, who were learning about the civil rights movement, he wasn't a proponent of making sure that they felt guilty for being white. He just wanted to make sure that kids understand the history, that teenagers, that high schoolers, middle schoolers, elementary school students, that they're able to understand history so that we don't repeat it again. And that's what a lot of us, you know, are standing for, but that as Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida would call it, that's wokeism, right? And it's, at the end of the day, that's not exactly what it is. It's just wanting to stand for what's right.
100%.
And that's what I liked Beto about. And whenever I saw that Greg Abbott won, I could believe
by
it.
a good amount too.
Yes, you know,
it was
and
by a good amount.
I could believe it, but at the same time, I was so frustrated because, and what frustrated me a lot too was Uvalde County, the same county that had a school shooting of all those elementary school kids. They voted overwhelmingly for Greg Abbott, which made absolutely zero sense because Greg Abbott does not care about them.
That just shows party loyalty.
Exactly. He's literally, you know, someone who is super, you know, pro-Second Amendment, has no plans to create gun legislation, to really do anything to curb shootings. And you just had a shooting occur in your own city, and you still voted for the man that does not care about you. You know, and that's what frustrated me so much. And I'm just, oh my, and then what I started thinking a little bit about too, with everything going on, was global warming and climate change. You know, for those of y'all that don't recognize this,
You're wrong.
We're in South.
That's it.
we're in South Bend, Indiana, and it is November. What's today? November 10th? November 11th?
Facts, yes, yes.
And it was 74 degrees today. That literally is a telltale sign. It is a literal example of global warming and climate change. And yet, in Texas, it's getting even hotter. We don't have a grid in Texas. We don't have a federally regulated grid like every other state in the country has. And whenever it gets super cold, in those early, that January, February.
Remember the snowstorm? I don't even think there were storms, were they?
Oh my, okay, so in Texas, it didn't really snow like that.
Yeah.
But what we have is we get super freezing weather. And we had that, I believe, 2021, I believe it was 2021, where we had a super bad freeze. We had a real bad freeze. And our power grid went out because we didn't have a federally regulated power grid that we could rely on. So the Texas government started doing rolling blackouts. They would make sure, okay, well, these cities in Texas are going to have their electricity, while these other sides, we're going to turn off theirs. So they're going to have to, do whatever. And we had to keep on rotating. And I remember so distinctly being in my house with my mom, and we looked at the thermostat, and it said like 30 degrees inside the house. And outside, we were getting close to 10 degrees, 10 to 17 degrees. We were freezing inside, freezing outside, all because we didn't have a power grid that could actually sustain us so that we could have heating. And yet, Texans saw this, and they saw Ted Cruz, one of our senators, go off to Cancun, Mexico, and then whenever he found out, he blamed it on his daughter, on his family, and people still decided, you know what? Greg Abbott, that's who I want. That's who I want. It makes no sense to me. It frustrated me so much because you have someone like Beto, who literally, he actually cares about Texas. He cares about Texans. He wants to make sure we're on a power grid to where we don't have to have rolling blackouts and we don't have to freeze to death.
I have a feeling that's going to happen again.
And it happened earlier this year, I believe, too.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to continue to happen because we keep on electing these Republicans who don't care about us. And I don't mean to ramble too. So if you want to hop in,
No,
you can hop in too, because I'm so frustrated. The other thing that frustrated me was Florida with Ron DeSantis.
Okay.
Everyone expected Ron DeSantis to win. We knew that the Democratic candidate didn't really have much of a chance at winning. Ron DeSantis, he has a chokehold over Florida. And what frustrated me so much was his acceptance speech of whenever he won the governor position.
What did he say?
The thing that stood out to me the most was, and I wish we had this video on deck, so that we could show y'all as well. I'll try and link it if I can find it in the description. But he pretty much said, this is Florida, where we get rid of all that wokeism stuff. Wokeism goes to die in Florida.
That's not a good thing.
And that frustrated me so much because, I'm an Africana Studies major, you're an Africana Studies minor, right?
Might be a major, we'll see.
Maybe. Hop on the train, but whenever I hear these sort of things, it's so frustrating to me because you have to think about, what do Republicans consider to be woke, right? What do they consider to be woke? What they consider to be woke is learning about American history in its totality. I don't know if y'all followed, but in the Florida debates, governor debates, Ron DeSantis, he said that the United States was not founded on stolen land. He said the United States was never founded on stolen land and that we should stop indoctrinating children.
See, this is just lies.
And
I feel like they misconstrued everything.
It's not even misconstruing anything. It's just misinformation.
Yes.
You're just spreading misinformation to people who are easily manipulative and very gullible. And that's what's so frustrating to me because he's able to get away with these things and then millions of people still vote for him. And whenever he gave his acceptance speech, whenever he's saying this, Florida is where wokeism comes to die, it's so frustrating because as an African Studies major, everything that I focus on is trying to find solutions, find ways that we can promote change in this country, find ways that we can teach our children the actual history of this country, because I have the fear that one day children are going to grow up, what's the generation after us?
Generation Alpha?
Yeah, Generation Alpha. I have a fear that them and the generation that comes after them, and the generation that comes after that, they're going to grow up seeing minorities disproportionately in poverty, and they're going to see this, they're going to say, oh, well, they're just poor. But they're not going to understand why they're actually in these situations. They're not going to understand the generational impacts of slavery. They're not going to understand the generational impacts of Native Americans being killed and forced into reservations and they're still brutalized, or they're still indoctrinated. They're still mistreated. They're not going to understand how Hispanic people have been treated. They're not going to understand how Asian people have been mistreated in this country, and how all that can lead to where you see today and in the future, the way the places that they live, the things that they have to endure. They're going to grow up not understanding that, and just going to be told, oh, well, that's just them. That's just their choice. Oh, black people, they're just lazy. When in actuality, you have to understand the history behind all of these things. And whenever Ron DeSantis and other Republican governors and politicians, they go and say, wokeism, this, we should stop indoctrinating our children. No one is indoctrinating children.
Nope.
No one is trying to say, white children, you should feel bad.
Yes, it's just awareness. That's literally it. It is just awareness and acknowledgement about what has happened, as opposed to just lying about it or trying to keep it down. We're not saying you should feel guilty about it. We're just saying that you should acknowledge it and then act accordingly.
Exactly. And we're not saying to, go kill white people. We're not saying any of that. We're not saying, oh, well, whenever we, minorities become the majority one day, we're going to go enslave white people. No one is saying that. All that we're saying is we just want y'all to actually learn history so that not only can we move forward, but we can begin to actually decolonize. We can actually begin to rebuild our country. We can begin to actually rebuild. Donald Trump has to make America great again. When was America great? When are we what are we
back
going
anytime.
to again?
I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back anytime.
Are we going back to when black people were on the plantation? Are we going back to the civil rights? What are we going back to? It has never been great, but these these statements that they make, they're arisen out of just this ignorance. And that's so frustrating to me. And I can't stand whenever I hear these Republican politicians saying, we're going to get rid of all this wokeness. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And, and I'm going to transition this a little bit to black voting and black voters. People are like, well, black people, you have to get out and go vote. You have to go vote because if you want to make sure that, your children can learn history, you want to get those Democrats in office, you have to make sure you go vote. But the problem is that in this midterm election, we did vote. We did vote, but you want to know what's so interesting? There was an NBC News statistic that came out. They had all the statistics that showed the race demographic, ethnic demographics of people who voted. And you want to know what's so interesting to me? Black people voted 82%, I believe, for Democrats. Millions of black people went out. The only place where I will say that black people needed to get out and vote, and they absolutely didn't, was disappointing me, was in Louisiana. One senator that I was very big on was Gary Chambers Jr. I wrote a 10-page essay about him here at the University of Notre Dame. I loved his platform. I loved everything he stood for, and he literally just needed black people to go out and vote. Louisiana has 800,000 black voters, I believe, registered black voters. And Gary Chambers Jr. only won about 100,000 plus votes compared to John Kennedy, who ended up winning. I believe, is that his name? I believe so. He's a Republican that won governorship again in Louisiana with 600,000 plus votes whenever the last time I saw. I'm sure it's increased since then. That's the only place you can say black people need to go out and go vote. But in general, for this election, we went out and vote. But you want to know what held us back?
What?
It was white voters. It was white voters that held us back. And what held us back even more, someone in our list of our newsletter, someone actually responded. They said they wanted us to talk about feminism. And I just want to bring this up real quick because, with feminism, it's all about the advancement of women's rights, women's voices, things of that nature. But an overwhelming majority of white women voted Republican.
Yeah,
the same party,
that angers me.
The same party that's trying to take away your rights. They're trying to take away your voice. They're trying to take away your votes. And you still
Same for people of color too, not just women.
And that's what frustrated me the most. I just want to connect that to feminism just real quick. We can go into feminism in a later, topic, a later time, whatever.
Way more in depth.
Exactly. But I just want to just cover that because, black people, we showed up, we went out and we voted. We mailed in votes, we went to the polls and we voted, and it still didn't matter. Because we still weren't able to get all the Democratic politicians that we won. And that's not even to say that Democrats are the best platform or the best party for black voters, because they have used us for years, decades they have used us, right, just to get our vote because they know they can pander. Oh, they're not going to vote Republican because Republicans say that they're going to, X, Y, and Z. So we already know they're going to come, vote for us just because we're Democrats, right?
Yeah.
But we still went out and we voted. Black men voted overwhelmingly for Democrats. Black women voted overwhelmingly for Democrats. If you look at the Georgia governor race, black men voted overwhelmingly for Stacey Abrams to win the governor position.
I'm so mad about Stacey Abrams too.
That frustrated me too.
Yeah, I'm so mad about that too.
Black men voted overwhelmingly for them. Black women voted overwhelmingly for her, and she still lost. And it just goes to show that people are saying, "Oh, well, black people, y'all don't go out and vote." We do go out and vote in mass numbers, but it has always been these white Republican voters that hold us back. The R for Republican, it shouldn't stand for Republican. It should stand for regression. That's what it should stand for, because the Republican Party always wants to regress our country. They always want to push us back to where we were in the past. And that's what's so frustrating to me, And this midterm election, it really showed that. I don't want to ramble much more.
I think someone should consider poli-sci. What do you guys think? I think the way he was talking, I'm like, how are you not poli-sci yet? How are you not poli-sci yet?
Studies in sociology are a lot more interesting to me. If I'm being honest with you, I hate politics. I really do. I could not imagine being a major where you just cover politics and all that.
It is very frustrating.
And it's boring too. It's so boring in my opinion.
Didn't it seem that way how long you were talking?
In general, it's boring, but with the midterm election, like stuff just comes out. It gets entertaining.
Yeah, I think something that really frustrates me is I was watching this video on TikTok. I know that doesn't always start well, but I promise this is valid. So I was watching a video on TikTok, and it was of a comedian. My For You page has a lot of comedians on it with like skits and everything. So like the skit that I was watching, the comedian happened to say like, "Oh yeah, I didn't vote." I don't know if it was a joke or I don't know if it was real, but I replied like, "You didn't vote?" with like a question mark exclamation point, and the amount of responses I got to my comment were like, I was like, wow. I just think that I'm really hesitant to say that votes don't matter because I full-heartedly believe that they do. When you look at one individual vote, yes, I'm willing to understand if one person didn't vote, yes, that probably would not matter. But when 1 million people think that and 1 million people don't vote, that matters.
Yeah.
Like that actually does show that it does make a difference. Because if you have too many people thinking like this, then that's a lot of votes that aren't being counted. That's a lot of people who are not going out to vote. And then another thing too that really frustrates me is like I feel like so many people focus on like, oh, like both the parties are like bad, which is like obviously like everyone is bad, but or like to some extent not everyone is perfect. I mean, like I feel like so many, like a lot of the comments too were talking about like imagine voting for like one of these like parties that like just doesn't want to get anything done or doesn't want to compromise, and I'm just like I feel like this beats around the bush and I'm just like just vote, like literally just go vote for who you think is best. Like it frustrates me when people don't vote. I understand that everyone has a right to not vote, and I'm understanding of it, but I just don't agree about not voting because I feel like it is important, and I think too many people focus on like, oh, like this party has done this. Well, of course we should always critique our parties and everything, but when it comes to like, of course, like we should never like just be like, oh, let's just like go along for the ride. Like no, we should definitely critique our politicians. But I think when you focus too much on like, oh, like they're just both bad, so like I'm just not even gonna bother. Like no, like I want people to be involved, but I know that's like asking too much of everyone because not everyone is interested in politics or not everyone cares, I guess. But politics really does shape like our entire life, like our entire lives, and I think a lot of people either just don't realize that or they just don't care because they don't think it affects them, but it does.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too. You know, the state of politics now is so frustrating because we're confined to voting for, you know, the lesser of two evils in a lot of the sense, right?
Yeah.
And then that's what's so frustrating to me because in a democracy like the United States, you should not be confined to just vote for this guy's bad, but this guy's even worse, so I'm gonna vote for God is bad. like that should not be how politics. That should not be how a democracy works. But it's so frustrating to me, and we saw that a lot, you know, with the 2020 presidential election. Mm-hmm. A lot of people didn't like Joe Biden. A lot of Democrats that voted for Joe Biden did not like Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's facts. Yeah.
A lot of people did not like Donald Trump. But you were forced to vote for whoever you thought. If you thought Donald Trump was the lesser of two evils, you voted for Trump. If you thought Joe Biden was the lesser of two evils,
or you just voted for the party you thought you were the party that you were loyal to.
Exactly,
So
and that's so frustrating to me, you know, because that shouldn't be the way that politics works. We should be able to be represented by people who can, you know, that can stand out, that can lead us, that can actually make the United States look good. And you can argue that Joe Biden, you know, doesn't always make the United States look good. You can argue that Donald Trump doesn't always make the United States look good. Regardless, neither one of them were great candidates. Joe Biden's like 100,000 years old. He shouldn't have been running. Donald Trump, you know, say whatever you want to say about him. I don't believe he should have ran either. He's gonna, you know,
absolutely not.
He's gonna be announcing his bid in 2024, I believe, sometime.
Better not win. Oh my God.
So, you know, and it's like, but both of those candidates were horrible. Like literally, both of them were bad, and yet we were still confined to vote for them. And that's what, you know, politics should not be that way. You should not have to be confined to voting for the lesser of two evils. But for whatever reason, in the United States, we can't get that right.
Yeah.
We're always confined to that.
Mm-hmm. I feel like something that I remember talking about when I was in high school, I believe, is that the reason why we get stuck with voting for like the lesser of two evils is because like most of the people who run, like most of the good intentioned like people who would want to make the country better, like don't run because they understand like how much work it is, how draining it could be, how like dehumanizing to some extent it could be, how stressful it could be, so then they don't end up running. And the people who do end up running are the people who are like not always good intentioned. Of course we have good intentioned politicians. I'm not saying that we don't, but more often than not, there's so many people who would do great in the political atmosphere who don't even run because they just don't want to get involved with all of this like, with like the current state of politics just because it's so messy and it's just so it's just bad, like you were explaining earlier. So it's like that's something that I feel like is also very frustrating with politics.
And another thing to add to that too is even whenever good people do run, they're still held back by their own party.
Exactly.
One candidate that I really liked in the presidential election I liked Bernie Sanders. I liked what he said for a lot. I know a lot of us, in our generation, a lot of us like Bernie Sanders.
Bernie, feel the burn.
Because everything that he stood for, even though he was, born whenever Jesus walked the earth, he's super old.
They are old. We need to get some more youth in here. Like they are old.
Even though he was super old, he, in my opinion, and y'all are free to disagree as well. This is my opinion. I feel like he was the best Democratic candidate. I liked what he stood for. I liked a lot of people that hate socialism, but I like the sort of socialist aspects that he wanted to incorporate. He could keep us capitalist, but also incorporate some sort of socialist policies. And I personally, I like that. But he was held back by his own party because they realized, and this was leaked by WikiLeaks, I think, too, actually. But the Democratic Party, the Democratic Convention, they realized Bernie Sanders, probably has no chance against Donald Trump. So they held him back, even though he was the real, and you can argue Elizabeth Warren, whoever you wanted to, vote for. But all these better candidates than Joe Biden, they were held back because they realized Joe Biden, he was the VP to Barack Obama. He has a better chance of beating,
he was
Donald
more
Trump.
moderate.
Exactly. He had a better chance of beating Donald Trump, and they pushed him forward, and it just kind of goes to that too. It just kind of ties into what you're saying, and we're running out of time, I believe, but I had one more point I wanted to make, unless you have some you want to add.
Go ahead.
So I also won this midterm election in North Carolina. I believe
you really should be poli-sci. You pay attention to everything. But anyways, keep going.
In North Carolina, there was a race for sheriff, I believe, going on, and I read about this actually just this morning, and it's frustrated me a lot too. So in North Carolina, there was this man that ran for sheriff. It's a white man, Republican. Literally before he ran, he was pretty much forced to resign his position because a tape came out of him calling his black officers that were below. He's a sheriff. No, he was calling his black police officers black bastards.
Like where this is going.
He was calling black police officers black bastards, and he was saying a lot of racially derogatory words about black people. A lot of slurs. He called black people a lot of slurs, and he was forced to resign. But then the Republicans in North Carolina, in this city, or in this, whatever a sheriff, patrols, they voted him back in. They literally re-voted him back in, and he put a message out on, I can't remember what it was, on Facebook or Twitter. He just said, "Thank you all." And that frustrated me, because it goes to show how people overlook racism. It's like racism does not occur to a lot of these Republicans. It doesn't, like...
It's not seen as important.
It's not seen as important.
Yes.
And how can you have a sheriff who's supposed to be protecting and serving all white, black, Hispanic, Asian, all these citizens, and he's still able to get away with calling, his black police officers racial slurs, and you just vote him back in? He literally had to resign because he was facing so much backlash. But then these same Republican voters went and voted him back in.
Yeah, that's unbelievable to me. That's something I've thought about too. That's like, when you look at, I'm just going to say the Republican Party. This is just my view, so I'm just going to say, when you look at the Republican Party and you see, like, okay, we can talk about Trump, for example. Like, when you talk about Trump, you can see, like, he's clearly xenophobic, he's clearly racist, clearly homophobic, like, clearly just doesn't support all people as someone who was president is supposed to. They're supposed to support all of their citizens and all of their people, and just humanity in general. But in my opinion, he does not do that. And when you see so many people just overlook that, like, you really want someone who doesn't keep like humanity in mind, or who doesn't like support all of his people. Like, I just don't understand that. You really, like, I understand like the economy and like inflation is bad and we don't want like our country to like go in shambles, but I think to an extent like we need to be more prioritize more like just people's livelihoods, and we don't do that. We just want to, like, it's always like, oh, like the economy, and maybe that's just like the ignorance of me being like a young person, but like I believe that like we need to prioritize more just caring about others. And so many of these, and like every time like something racist happens or something homophobic happens, it's just like, oh well, it happened, but like that doesn't really change my opinion. Like it should change your opinion. Yeah,
it should change your opinion, but unfortunately, like you said, a lot of people they don't really,
they overlook
isn't
it.
really an important point to them. It's not an important aspect of life. It's not an important aspect of the voting ballot for them. They don't really care about that, and that's what's so frustrating, because we're so single-minded. I brought this up earlier. We're so single-minded, and we're so closed-minded. We're so selfish. We're very selfish. We don't really care outside of ourselves. So if it's not, if I'm a white person You know, if I'm not black, if I'm called, you know, if I see someone being called N-word, if I see X, Y, and Z, I may not be inclined to jump in and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to vote against that. You know what, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to, you know, try and become a proponent of change. Not everyone is like that. And it's so frustrating to me because as black people, we're always, you know, overlooked, we're always ignored, we're always rejected, dejected. And then it just gets to the point where whenever we, you know, we try to create change, there's always someone that's holding us back.
Yep.
And it's because people, they don't, it's hard for people to really grasp the concept of racism, especially whenever they don't experience racism. You know, and then whenever you have, you know, black people like Kanye and Candace Owens saying, oh, racism doesn't exist, X, Y, and Z, that only feeds into their mentality, it only feeds into the ways that they think, that feeds into their beliefs. And it's so frustrating, you know, just having to see what happened in North Carolina, you know, to see what happened in, you know, in Texas, to see what's happening in Florida, all of these big states. And we're seeing where people, where their priorities lie. We're seeing where people choose to vote. And these midterm elections, they showed that, and they frustrated me so much. I don't even want to talk about it no more at this point. I can't even say I'm over it because it impacts us on so many different levels. But it just makes me wonder, when will we see the change that we want to see? You know, what more can we do? One thing, you know, there was a Gen Zer, his name Maxwell Frost. I wish I remember his name. He's the first Gen Zer to obtain a position in Congress.
Yeah, I remember.
You know, so that was a big highlight. You know, that's the first one of us that's actually going out to you know, create meaningful change. And you know, he's not enough though. You know, it takes more of us, it takes more people. And you know, for any of y'all that are watching that may be Republicans, you know, I don't know if y'all watch our content, you know, to kind of, you know, see what we think, you know, but I just urge y'all to open y'all's minds up a little bit, you know, respectfully. You know, I would never berate y'all, I would never bash y'all, but I just want y'all to open y'all's minds and kind of see where we're coming from sometimes. See where other people outside of yourself are coming from. Because I believe that whenever you look outside of yourself and you look at some of these issues that are going on that don't pertain to you, but pertain to others, I think that your voting patterns may shift. And I think that it could really reinforce, you know, our ability to call on Democrats to assist us more than what they have, actually try to help us more. You know, if we have more people on our side, more people that recognize our issues, and you know, maybe, you know, maybe your vote doesn't change, maybe you'll still continue to be a Republican, you know, and you know, that is what it is. That's your choice. You're obligated, you know, I'm not obligated, but you're entitled to you know, to your beliefs, to your voting opinions. But I just urge y'all to at least, you know, just look into what we say. You know, at least take what we say and think about it, internalize it. And if you still choose to be Republican, that's fine. But if you choose to, you know, kind of open your mind, see what we think, we'd appreciate that too.
Yeah, and when you do keep that, having an open mind doesn't mean just like hearing what is said, but also truly listening and not just immediately validating everything that comes out of like our mouths or our thoughts. Because I feel like so many times when we do express our like experiences or our beliefs or just like historical facts, they're often like quickly like rebutted with like, oh, like this isn't true, or like it's automatically like pushed to like an extreme that's so far extreme that like it's just not the truth anymore. So like, yeah, that too. And then also, I don't see, like you were talking about like how it's like it's often very selfish. Like, what is so bad or so wrong with just caring about other people? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that more of us need to prioritize that. While you are supposed to vote for people who believe keep your own best interests, I think you should also think about who keeps like the majority of people's best interests at heart as well. Like, not just yourself. Because I feel like we end up like this whole like selfishness and just only caring about yourself is like, and America's like the U.S. is the only place that really does that. So just there's nothing wrong with caring about other people or keeping other people in mind too when you vote.
Do you have any, I'm done talking about politics now, so do you have anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
All right, well, yeah. I just want to call on the United States to do better as a country.
Go vote, yes, do better and go vote.
Do better as a country, and you know, as always, black is beautiful, black is love, and black is excellence. We love y'all, and we out.
Thanks.